Great. Oh, hi. Sorry, I saw the delay and on the screen. How are you doing? It's Mandy Celine here. I am the founder of Breadbox Studios. I'm a director and editor, and we're a post-production house. So that's kind of a little bit about me. Just so you know, we've got a little guest star here. This is Tiggy. He is snoozing by the heater, that he's got a very hard Tuesday ahead of him. Today, we are going to talk about all things beginner color. So if scopes have always been complicated for you, you've had trouble understanding and reading them, we're going to demystify that today. We're also going to go through the Lumetri color panel, specifically, let's try and get words correct today, specifically with the basic, the creative, and the curves. We'll show you, hopefully we'll have time to show you how to create a lot out of all the color that we do. But yeah, I've decided to give myself like a long list of things we can do in this hour. I'm hoping to get to them all. Before we go into Premiere Pro, let's break down a couple of terms. So first off, color grading versus color correction. Color correction is just simply correcting the color on an image. So like that has a bit of a science to it, you know, normalizing the color, as it were. I don't like the word normalizing for color, but there we are. And grading is more of the art. Some people will be like, there's a right way to color grade. I'm always like, there isn't. The whole point is to, that's where the art comes in, make the visuals, you know, make your piece feel unique to what it is. Like, let's think Blade Runner 2049, so orange, or how, we'll look at some other examples actually in a bit, hopefully. And before we further go in, I want to define 3 terms that we're going to say a lot. So hue means simply color. If I say hue, saturation is talking about the intensity of that color. And Luma is the amount of light into that color, the light and the darkness in that color to really break it down, basically. But hopefully you've got that. I've just shouted some words at you, and we're going to head into Premiere Pro. So let's take a look at the color panel and the scopes. Let's just have a look at what's going on. On my left here, we've got the scopes. We're going to go through those in a moment. And on my right, I have the Lumetri color panel. I'm going to take you through the basic colors, and I'm going to make this bigger for you so we can all be looking at the same thing, like it's all over the screen. There's a lot of terms within the basic color panel that sometimes really confuse people, understandably, because like shadows and darks, what's the difference? Highlights and whites, what's the difference? So basically, we have your color temperature and tints. Those will go between magenta, blue, orange, typically, and green. And that's how you would correct or balance an image. Your exposure is how bright that whole image is. Is it really dark or is it really bright? Contrast is, it depends. So contrast tries to either make the high and low end of your light brighter or darker, depending on how, if you want more or less contrast. It kind of plays with all the other sliders. It's kind of getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Highlights is the top end of the color. Shadows is the kind of mid end. No, highlights is the top end. Whites is the bit underneath that. Shadows is the mid end of the shadows, and blacks is the darkest. So that's a really quick overview. We're going to see how those interplay with our scopes. Now, this is the part that is like people get worried about. Come on, there we go. So we have our scopes here on the left. I have 3 scopes. These are the 3 that a majority of people will use. There are so many different kinds. Some people really love the histograms and all sorts. I'm sticking to these 3 because I think they're the best way to enter and understand color correction and grading. So let's take a look at our Luma waveform, and only a Luma waveform. We're going to get rid of these other 2, and we're going to come back. It'd be really good. It'd be really nice if it just focused on that, but it's not going to. You know what? Bugs in Premiere, it happens. It's a technology. So the Luma waveform is focusing on exposure and light and how balanced that entire image is. And that's really important for the light panel here in the basic color correction. All these numbers here, you don't need to worry about them too much. You can frankly ignore everything on the right, especially getting started. It's the part on the left that you really need to understand. I'm going to try and make this bigger just for a second so you can see. So you'll notice like 0, 10, 20, 30. The only numbers you need to worry about are between 0 and 100. Everything above and below, it means you've done too much. So 100 is the top end of the whites. If you see a flat line like this, it means you're losing information at this point of your image. And whereas 0 is your blacks. And again, if you start seeing a low line there, it means you're losing information. You want to come close to those boundaries, but you don't necessarily want a line like there is here. Sometimes it's unavoidable if you're dealing with, say, a white wall studio. It might look like that if you don't want it to look grey. But generally, you don't want this looking line. 0 to 20 on this graph here, well, you'll notice actually what the image I have showing, it's not got enough dark colors in it. That is blacks coming out of it. Yep, soft. That's referring to the black slider here. That will work with everything between 0 and 20. By the way, fun fact, the scale is called an IRE scale. It stands for something that doesn't matter, but it's by the guys that named it, called the National Institute of Radiographer Engineers or Radio Engineers, something like that. They just named it after themselves, but it's an IRE scale. 0 to 20 IRE is your blacks. So there's that. 20 to about 40 is your shadows. 40 to about, 20 to 50 is your shadows. 50 to 80 is your highlights. No, wait, whites to whites. I always confuse those two. And 80 to 100 is your highlights. It's your highlights. Confusing the two. So it's about balancing the dynamic range of your image across all that. And this we can see is, it's not terrible, but a lot of it is compressed. Now, the reason behind it is this clip in particular is a log clip that it's looking at. This one is colored. Oh, my histogram finally updated. But we can see here, there is a white background and it's not a clipping line. And that's kind of more what you'd want with a white background. You don't want just a straight up line, because you always want a bit of information. And you can see here on this image, actually, I could definitely work with more of the black end of the spectrum, because it's looking a bit, it's nearly there. It's just not quite there. It's looking a bit faded. And that's how the waveform interacts with IRE and with the way you edit. So if I show you if I take this exposure down, you'll see like everything gets so much darker, and that's compressing it much further down to the 0. And if I bring it up past the 100, you'll see like we're losing information because it's all up at the top. And if we just play that exposure goes back to what it was, it's actually a pretty well exposed image. It just needs a little finessing. Likewise, if I go to contrast, you're going to see that if I move that contrast up, it's going to pull it, trying to create a bigger dynamic range. As you can see, that's not always better. And if I bring it all the way down, you'll notice that this starts to look quite faded and a bit flat, because it's pulling that dynamic range back into itself. We can reset these by double clicking. Great, love that. Let's see how it interacts with the highlights. So you can see highlights, you can see those moving up right there. Is it highlight? Yeah, highlights are the top end. So just talking to myself, you know, it's one of those Tuesdays. You can bring those up, and you can see like how much information is getting lost in the skin there. And we wouldn't want that, so we can get rid of that. And in the shadows, you can see that this actually makes the image look, I think, quite flat. Shadows are so important. And if we bring those down, it's too much. It's doing too much. And you'll see how that affects saturation within a color, because those three things, hue, saturation, and Luma, they interact and change the color. but you can see how that looks like less saturation when it's brighter and a lot more when it's darker. And then whites. Oh, maybe whites is that top end. My bad. Whites is the top end, highlights is the mid end. That makes sense. Whites and blacks are at the bottom of the spectrum. I always forget, and then, oh, there we are. So you can see if I bring that top end up, that background, that white background, those whites in his faces, it becomes super bright. We're losing information. If you wanted nothing but whiteness, that's probably what it would look like. I do like a little bit of like, you know, I like to see some of how the light is shaping around that person. I like to bring a little bit of that back. And then lastly, blacks. So if we bring that in, you can see if we bring it up, it becomes quite faded, but you can see a lot of detail in their dreads. And if we bring it down, you lose all that detail. It all becomes one big blob. So we'll bring that back to normal. That is the basics of our scope. I'm just gonna have a quick look and see if there's any comments happening. Great. Oh, there we go. Hey, for some reason my chat didn't load earlier. But also hi from London, Ray. I'm also in London. What up? So now I think we're going to move. Oh, what did I do? Smart. We're going to go back in and I'm going to show you now how the vector scope works. So the vector scope I like using to see how saturated my light is and if my skin tones are where I would want them to be. So what's going on here? There we go. No, let's get rid of this one. Great. So over here, let's make this big so we can really go through it. This is a vector scope. You'll notice that it has all the key colors on the side here. There's a line and then there's this guard, right? So this line is typically where you want most skin tones to fall on when you select them. See you later, Tiggy. He's just not interested, is he? Oh no, he's just going to play with my feet. Great for me. And then we have this boundary across here. And this boundary is the broadcast safe zone. It's what it's typically known as. So you don't want your colors like over here. You can see there is this blob of red coming out. Oh, let's get rid of it. Like right here. There's a big blob of red that shouldn't be outside of that zone. And what this is saying is on different screens, whether phone, computer, television, when it's in broadcast, that information is getting lost and it could just look very flat. It's too bright. The biggest issue I have actually is when I film people in neon jackets, and I always have to go in and finesse that because they are always out the broadcast safe zone. So this is what I think it's really useful to. It's also good to see which way your image, the color is moving towards. So there is a lot of red in this. There's a lot of skin tones. So this isn't uncommon or unusual. Now, what I like to do is I like to go into my effects effect controls, which are over here because I moved them so I can see what I was doing. And I'm just going to take a little pen tool because we're going to do a mask here. Great. And this is how I check my skin tones. So if you look at the histogram now, not the histogram, the vector scope now, you can actually see my skin tones are bang on that line. So I know that that color is somewhat accurate. Again, it might sometimes fall a bit more red or a bit more yellow depending on the person, but generally it will fall on that line. Like this is a black person, they're amazing. I shot them for Jekka Black Cosmetics and they were so much fun. But like on the line, and I fall also on that line, and I am super pale, the other end of that spectrum. So I know that at least my skin tone, it's an accurate representation of that skin tone. So I can get rid of that mask now. That's how I like to check from time to time. If you're doing like this is great for your correction stage. If you grade, then the skin may change color and normalizing that might not work for the image you're trying to go for, but it's always good to know. So that is the vector scope in like a nutshell. We'll be playing with that and it is the vector scope. We'll be playing with that in a second. And then lastly, I just like to gloss over the parade because some people love this. I don't care. Like I use it just to check my levels. It's not my favorite one. The other two are the ones I use a lot. Got rid of the wrong one. Goodbye. And back onto this. So this has your key 3 colors in color grading, and generally you want them to be similar. If you've normalized your image, they will be similar. In some cases, the red might present a bit more, as we can see over here. There's a lot more red in kind of like the upper end of the colors than, say, a green or a blue. But that's because our faces have blood and this is a close-up of a person. So generally in those like mids, they'll just be a bit more mids to like highlights. It will have a bit more red in it. So if you're like, oh, I can't tell if this is too tinted a certain color, you can see that here. A better example to show this off is over here where this image is too pink, and we'll try and fix it later. It is all over the place too pink and has a bit too much blue in the background. And we're going to try and fix that in a bit for us. So those are the 3 scopes so far. If you have any questions, don't forget to put them in the chat. We'd love to see it. But that's how I would usually deal with an image. By the way, log footage on all of these presents, I think I said earlier, like a bit tighter. So like you can see there's like missing information, but with the color, with the RGB, it will show the color range across it, especially when colored. We can see that there's not enough blue in this, and the red backpack is skewing this somewhat, but he has a blue t-shirt on, so this should be really brighter. We'll get to that. Look, Mandy, you're getting ahead of yourself. So now we've gone through the scopes and we've gone through the basics with the Lumetri panel. We're going to now play with it and we're going to work with several images. So first thing we're going to do, let's go back to our favorite person who I started with. So we want to make these blacks look better. If I just zoom this in, I feel like you'll be able to see there's detail, but it is a bit flat. It's missing some contrast up here. This is definitely the color that's over the broadcast safe zone. But actually the rest of it is not terrible, but I feel like we could do more, we could do better. And I definitely know for a fact that on my MacBook screen, because I don't color grade actually using my MacBook screen because it can show things more contrasted. But if I look over at the stream, I can see that actually it's not as like vibrant as it should be. And that's why we need scopes. Scopes, your eyes will lie to you. So we need to use our scopes to fix this up. So let's come out of this guy and I'm going to put my scopes back. One there and here. Nope, wrong one. I don't like that one. Some people love it. It's not for me. And I need to fix the order because this is pancakey. So yeah, you can just play with it doing this. Take that off. And then we're going to go with that one. And this is the... I'm very particular. I really like my scopes in a very particular order. And the way you just do that is right click until you're happy with it. So we can see everything here. And I can definitely see not enough blacks in this image. So we're going to go up to Lumetri color and we're just going to play with that. So there are 2 ways we can start this off. If you need a quick and dirty edit, you can click this auto button. This is not the auto from many years ago. This is a couple of years old now, but it's their new auto that kind of looks at the image. It's an AI feature, fun fact, and it tries to figure out how that should look more normal. So it gives you, I think, a good starting place sometimes because it's like, ooh, it's made it brighter, but then it's been able to knock down the contrast. The highlights have been knocked, everything else has been knocked down even a few points actually. So there are a couple of ways we could play with this. We can decide we want more contrast and look and play with that versus our scopes. And that definitely pulls that dynamic range out, but I'm not entirely sure it's doing what I want it to do. So I'm gonna get rid of that. I'm fine with my highlights. I think I need to play with my shadows. I think we need to bring back some richness into that skin. Ooh, love that. And actually, if you can notice, as I'm pulling this down, you'll notice the color in the vectroscope along that line is getting longer. And that's because that color is getting deeper. So how do we want this here? I want some more shadows about. I like about here. We really gotta address this bright color happening over here. There's a lot going on. So we're gonna actually have to move on to our curves to do that. So curves, if you use Lightroom, this is gonna look super familiar to you. Essentially, this is the bright part, this is the dark part, this is your middle, your mids, and with that you can move these up and down, and it really affects the image quite drastically. The white will affect the exposure more than anything of that image. Red will affect the reds, green will affect greens, and say it with me, blue will affect blue. So we're actually not going to play with this panel specifically. What I want to do is go to hue versus saturation, because I want to pick a specific color. And I have a feeling the color we want to play with, have I got, yeah, you're going to get a little pipette. And I have a feeling that bright red is this one here. And I'm going to play with bringing this down below. Ah, yes. And immediately, like, it goes down past those guidelines. Now, I don't want to bring it that far down. I'm just showing you how it works. I'm going to pull that up as high as we can to about here. And that will, you can even see there is more detail now in this area than there was. It's very minor, very, very minor. But when I'm working with a client in particular, I want to make sure that if they love this video, maybe they're a creator and they broadcast a video at Buffer, I'm going to make sure that that video looks great on any screen. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to go back up to our basic correction. I'm not happy with the amount of color that's left as skin, so I'm actually going to undo what it's done in saturation. I'm going to have a look at this scope. You can double click to zoom in, but it's just not letting me see as much as I want. And I do believe I do need to bring it down slightly. Just slightly. There we go. But how do we get that richness back? So for this, we can dip into our creative panel. I find the basic is great to get you like 99% of the way there. Then I dip into the creative panel because you get a couple of extra options, particularly vibrance and saturation is also in this one. What people ask me all the time, what the difference between saturation and vibrance is, and why do they think they prefer vibrance over saturation, and they're wondering how those work. So saturation, what it does is it boosts all of the color up as high as it can on that scale if you're boosting up, or it will desaturate it. As an example, if I pull this all the way up, you can see that there's a lot of color in that happening. If I bring it all the way down, it goes black and white. So that deals with all of it. Vibrance, however, is something I do really prefer to use. We'll take the bottom end of a color and try and bring that up or down. So if I show you vibrance, it's going to bring that all the way up, and it looks richer without being too overpowering even on its top level. Although I will say that this is a lot. And then it'll kind of mute it, but not make it fully black and white all the way down. So that's how those two interact. So when I see that this skin tone can do with just a little bit of a oof, maybe I'm going to boost the vibrance a bit to about here. I think looks quite good. And I might have to take that saturation down a smidge to do that. So if I bring that down, I can bring this up. And what you can see, I'm actually going to get rid of the parade. So hopefully you can see this better. So as you can see, when I move that vibrance up and down, that color gets wider because it's just got more detail in it, which is great. So we want that as far as we can crack it without going over that line. That looks better, I think. So I feel like we have corrected that. Let's see. If you go up to this little FX button at the top, we can switch that on and off, and we've definitely put more detail back into that image. It's so minor, but I love showing minor on one of these clips. I always like to start because it makes so much difference. Yeah, that's great. I love that. Let's move on. What did I write down on this? We're going to look at log footage. So Here is a shot that I've did. Fun fact, this is in log. I haven't touched it. There is no grade. You can look. There is nothing here. No grade. Why does it look color graded, you may ask? What black magic is that? So recently, I would say under a year ago, Premiere introduced a feature I love, and they started adding settings. They added a setting button over here. Oh, you're not letting me draw? A settings button on the Lumetri panel. And this just gave us so much more features, and I loved it. And what you do is you can make sure you have auto tone map media switched on, and it just knows, because I was using a Sony log Gamma 3 Cine profile. It's like, yep, I know what color space that is. I'm going to grade it for you. So it takes you to a Rec 709 immediately. So I don't need to do anything, which is great. I'm actually going to move timeline so we can focus on just these two clips so I know which ones I'm dealing with. But yeah, you can see same thing, auto tone map. And what you can also do is you can go to Premiere, settings, color. Oh, they've moved it again. This is where it did used to be. But there's a couple of different ways to switch on the auto tone map. And you can do it there. I'm pretty sure you can do it. I might be wrong, but might be lying. Let's have a look. Where's that clip? Begins with B. And if you right click, you can go to modify color. There you go. And you can tell it if you want to use certain color spaces or to override it and do all that as well. But it's in the Lumetri panel, and it just like, it means like you don't have to go, oh, I need to make an adjustment layer and put my Rec 709 on my footage. It's just done it. It's like, I know what that is. I got you. And we love a feature like that. Oh, I've just seen Sean. Yes, he explained it a bit better. I was really trying to dumb it down there. It brings more color saturation into the unsaturated part, but that's the lower end of the color. It doesn't do the whole color like saturation does. And that's why it doesn't affect skin tones as much. So Sean nailed it. Way better explanation, but it's the same thing. So we did that. Sorry, I'm going to go back to my log color. So that's how you switch on those preferences in there. And then you could grade that. Like if you were like, oh, that's the right one, that looks great, you can grade that. If I switch it off, it's gonna, oh, if I switch it off, it's done something. I don't know what, but that's not what it looks like. It is a log clip. It's probably because I've got it switched on elsewhere as well. Or is it at the top here? Preferences, display color. There's like 5 or 6 of these places, these settings. Nope, that's not it. Sorry, my screen is also very tiny to make this work on Zoom. So I'm trying to like see it. There it is, auto detect lock color. That's where I was. You can switch it on or off using the project here. You can also switch it off here. There's like 3 buttons, but it does it automatically. And I have it set so that I don't even have to go back to it. It just knows. So this was the original piece of footage I brought in. This is log footage. It's very, very flat. If we go to our scopes even, you can see the difference between that and that. So it like is pulling that dynamic range to get you to a starting place, which I adore. So there's that. We're going to grade this because of that new feature. I had to export the footage to look like that because I have this feature switched on to show you what this clip looks like log. It's very compressed. Let's go and get rid of this so we can focus on the Luma waveform, my favorite, because it just gets me like 80% of the way there every time I color grade. So we have this clip. It's a log clip. It's a very dark clip. I shot it maybe like to preserve as much of those highlights through the curtain I could, but I probably could have shot it a bit higher if I'm honest. And we're going to grade this together using the Lumetri. We're going to bring this up to a Rec 709 essentially, but like one that we can use. So the first thing I notice is everything is, it's on the darker end. It's not got a lot of brightness in there, so we can definitely up the exposure a bit. We can definitely play with that and bring that up to here. For sure, can do that. Great. That still looks good to me. We can go into the contrast and try and help that dynamic range. What's really interesting is you can see on the trace where the blinds are, but they're horizontal because it just brings in all those lines, which I think is really fun. So let's have a look. I don't want too much because the idea, I did put a smoke filter on this clip because I was shooting in an apartment with a very sensitive fire alarm and, you know, wasn't allowed to use haze. So I was like, ooh, Tiffin has got me. I put a smoke filter on my camera for this music video. So we could really play with this and probably bring this up to there. We'll go with the color in a second. We'll deal with the color in a second. The highlights, they're good. They're good there. I'm happy with where they were. The whites, we can bring those up for sure. You can see that room brighten up a bit more. Great. Love that. And the blacks, we can probably bring those down just a bit, just to bring a little bit of contrast into that grey couch. So we started from the bottom, now we're here, just dealing with our exposure, which I'm happy with. If I had just done auto, fun fact, it would have kept it a bit dark for me because I filmed this a bit too dark, so it is what it is. I do think that we could definitely deal with some more saturation, so I'm going to bring the scope in. Oof, by far there's not a lot of color in that. So we definitely need to bring some color into that using saturation. It is leaning yellow because of all those yellow highlights. Let's go about here. I'll deal with the vibrancy in a second because I actually wanted it to look a bit faded. This whole music video is about a woman that has a sad time, and she's reliving the arguments with her past ex, and it goes from this warm-ish color palette, which we will change it to in a second, like morning light was the idea, so I wanted it to be a bit more on the orange side. And then as the wall wraps around, it goes super blue, super desaturated, and she just has fights for 2 minutes with 4 exes. So, you know, is what it is. Maybe that is a bit too blue. No, I like it. I like it. You know, morning light. We shot this purposefully in the morning light to get it there. I'm happy with that. I'm going to dip into the creative and bring up that vibrance. Yeah. So we don't have become too much. There we go. That's bringing in a bit more of the colors I want. So we go here to here. And I could even, like, if I wanted to bring in more in the highlights, I could make the highlights tinted more orange using these dials and change the, like, and tint the shadows, which I was doing today because I was doing a green screen video for a West End show that's going out in December in the, I think it's the Apollo Theatre or the Pala. It's the one with Faulty Towers, is it? Whatever theatre that is. And I had to use these dials to kind of get the green out the skin shadows and make them more natural. So I could even dial that in here and then go up to basic correction and bring this down again. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. So that looks a bit more like in the highlights of that light coming in rather than the whole room being orange. I'm occasionally checking it on the screen where the stream is happening because I'm the kind of screen I'm editing on, not ideal to color correct on. I have a bigger screen. So I think that looks good. Let's see where we started. Well, we've come a long way, and I did that in minutes, and it was just literally using those 2 scopes. If I wanted to double check everything, I could just add this one back. It says there's a lot of red in it. I can probably make that a bit green. You know what? I'd rather make it a bit redder. I actually prefer that. Oh, I guess that's a bit better. Yeah, and that is a color grade for me, not a correction. I just went right in there and kept going because I know what I want this clip to look like. I could even make the highlights a bit more if I wanted to make it more faded, but I like that slight contrast as you go through that room. Play on the whites, maybe. No. And the shadows. Yeah, we can do that. That's nice. Yeah, worlds different. So I'm being asked if it's better to do your color grading on the clip or on an adjustment layer. The only reason I am doing it on a clip is because I have one clip. If I was color grading an entire project, I would be working in so many adjustment layers. If I'm not using the order tone map, I have an adjustment layer that's just Rec 709. And then I have an adjustment layer that's my color correction level. And then I have an adjustment layer that's my color grade level. Now my color grade might go across the whole project, and my color correction might be chopped up against various scenes because maybe one scene was filmed a bit darker and I need to bring that up. But I do work across adjustment layers. I love an adjustment layer. In fact, if I were to copy this simply, so I'm going to copy that and I'm going to go into my project. I'm going to make an adjustment layer. For those of you who don't know, you click this little post-it note looking thing, go to adjustment layer, okay that. I would give it a name, but we're not doing it because I'm on the fly. I'm going to right click, paste attributes, paste my Lumetri color. It's going to look really weird for a second because I haven't switched it off here. And it works exactly the same. But now that color grade can go across this clip, which I have no idea what it looked like, it's not bad, actually, because that's a sunsetty clip. So, and that will work now across that. It's not great. It's definitely a bit too saturated for that clip because there's a lot happening. But yeah, you can work across your layers in different ways. You can go in, if I duplicate this, for example, I can go in and get rid of all the color I did in the saturation, and go down and get rid of like all the saturation on this one. And then I can go on this one and only have the saturation. So I can go get rid of exposure. And you know what? I was about to reset the whole thing, but then I lose the color bits I did. So like you can do color on one end and maybe you want this to be bluer, and that will work across both clips. Fun fact. If you do your grade, I'm just going to switch these off for a second. If you do your grade and then save the source clip, if it's, say you filmed one 20-minute long clip and you didn't want to like grade every individual clip or do an adjustment layer, you just wanted that one clip to do one adjustment, you go into you just click this thing at the top here. There's two buttons. This one is just the clip. This is only referring to the one clip in the timeline. This is referring to that 20-minute clip that's in your project. So it will change everything in that project, which is fun. I can prove that as well by cutting this clip in half. This wasn't meant to be in the lesson, guys. Cutting that here, moving that here, and just for argument's sake, let's make it obvious and make it super blue. That clip should be blue over here. No, it's not, because I just did the clip because it's tapped onto only the clip. Whereas if I undo that, go back into source, go back over here, make this super, super blue. Why isn't it doing it? Oh, because I did it in the clip again. Come on. Source. Make it super blue at the source. There we go. Now this one is also blue. So not a lot of people know about the source versus the sequence clip. So you see this little icon up here. I wonder if I can zoom. There should be a zoomy button or a highlight button. Nope. I usually have a, there we go. So this timeline clip here means just what's in the sequence, whereas this with the clip and the audio means the original file in your project. So those are the difference between those two. Let's move on to something a bit more fun, because, you know, we've just been looking at the basics of color correction. What other features exist? Do you guys know about color match? So I love color match because it's fun to get an idea of what you want something to look like. We've gone back to this clip, which is log, that has been tone mapped. And I've got 3 examples. We have Blade Runner 2049, the orange film. We have Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is one of my favorite films, and also I'm sure one of Adobe's favorite films because of the amount of awards Adobe won with Everything Everywhere. And also we have The Social Network, another one of my favorite films, and also because then I get to look at Andrew Garfield. It's not a terrible thing to do. So how do I get this clip to look like them? Super easy. You go over here to color wheels and match. You'll switch on comparison view. I'm just going to make this a bit bigger for you guys. And what it will do is it'll open these 2 windows. This one will be just on your timeline. And I'm going to put that to the 2049 clip. And this will be the selected clip. Oh, welcome back. It must be, he must think it's near dinner. It's not, it's an hour and a half away. Anyway, we go to this and you simply click apply match. And what it will do is try and turn your clip into, as best as it can, the clip you've given as a reference, as a photo reference. So it's just made it super orange, which, like, that's just an orange clip. That's simple. What happens with, say, another look? So let's go to everything everywhere. I love this one. It's got greens in like the shadows. It still looks good on the skin. There's a very rich skin tone. Everything looks really pretty. And just gonna click apply match. And it's kind of done the same thing, but not gone too far, which I appreciate. You know, it's got that green and yellow look, I think, because that building has definitely got more greens in it. Oh, too far. And he's like, I definitely see the yellows coming through in the midtones, which I really enjoy, the midtones to highlights. And that's like a really quick and dirty grade that I can honestly use. That looks great. That looks totally fine. I'd be totally happy with that. If we wanted to adjust it, by the way, you can go into these. This will adjust the amount of light in your midtones. So maybe we want to make it darker there. I don't think we want to. That's fine. This adjusts your shadows and this adjusts your highlights. And then you can adjust the colors from there, which are already been set to what your match is, which is quite fun. Also, you can switch this off for face detection, so it will color the face more. I recommend keeping it on though. Yeah, the reds do also pop. You're right. They look great. But you know what? Let's get rid of all of that. I should have, there we go. We're back to normal and try the last clip. And the last clip is The Social Network, which is a very sepia film, very yellow film. And we're just going to click apply match again. And that looks like The Social Network to me. This one was like spot on. When I tried this earlier, I was like, it really works with The Social Network if you get the right clip. You've definitely got those like highlights all greener and yellower. Like the faces look very similar to me from here. It looks great. Oh, I do like that one. It's a shame I didn't get a clip with Tim's face in. This is Tim Nichols, by the way, and he has a series on Nebula going live, not a series, a film going live called Boomers that I second camera for on Thursday, on Halloween. I think that's Thursday, so I'm excited for him. But yeah, that looks just like The Social Network, and you saw how quick I did that. That was under 5 minutes. Way under 5 minutes. In fact, I wasn't meant to finish doing that till 4:45, and it was much quicker. But that's where we are. I do, sometimes it gets you like 50% of the way there, and you have to finesse it. But Social Network one, I'm going to keep that still on my computer for when I'm being lazy. I think that worked fabulously. Lastly, I want to spend the last bit of time. Oh, by the way, if you want to switch off comparison view, if you don't see it on the bottom here, you can just go to the plus and drag it in. It is the one with 2 screens. Again, it's very itty bitty. I can do this. I've got eyes that don't seem to be working. Why can't I see comparison view? There it is. It's on the bottom. It's here. And you just can drag that to your toolbar super easy. But we do want to switch it off because we're not comparing things right now. And we're going to click fit so that this fits in the center. Otherwise, that would drive me nuts. It would drive me nuts. And what we're going to do is we're going to play with changing a few color tones again using that vectorscope. So let's go into here. And we're going to use our scopes, and maybe I can make them a bit bigger. That'll do. I guess that'll do. This blue was meant to look like a sky. This is from Hello Sunday, sun care screen advert that when it launched a couple of years back, maybe in 22. We did a campaign and we were in a rainy day in February in a studio, and we had to make it look like it was daylight outside. So they just put up a blue paper roll and we're like, you'll fix it in post. And you're like, yeah. How do you fix that kind of thing in post, you ask? Simple. Curves. So curves have a lot of panels. It's like hue versus the saturation, which is just changing the saturation of a color. Hue versus hue, which is changing the color. So we'll do that in a second. Hue versus Luma, it's changing the brightness of that color. And then you don't need to worry about these so much at the moment. So let's go into this blue. I clicked there, it's got some dotty points that now I can know that that's the color I selected. And I could pull these up and down and change the color quite dramatically, actually. So that blue can become everything, anything and everything I want it to be. Maybe we want it to be green, but we don't. We want it to be blue. We want it to look like more like a convincing sky. So I think that means it's got to have a bit more red in it than it, because this is quite green where it was originally. Let's have a look where it was originally. It was there. And actually, I believe it should have more red in it to look a bit more like the sky. Maybe about here. I think that's pretty convincing. I like that a lot. I can see here, though, that I think her skin is a bit much. Her nails are a bit much. So we're going to go into the hue versus saturation. I think it's her nails there that are making it quite dramatic on this scope. And we'll try and bring this down a little. And when we do, there we go, a little. And now we're going to check our work. Turn it on, turn it off. Definitely looks better. I think her skin looks a bit, just needs a bit of an oomph now. So, gonna go into that creative and up the vibrancy a little bit there, expand that skin color. And that took 3 minutes. Like legitimately, I corrected within 3 minutes. Off and on. How, let me have a look at my scopes. I'm going to get rid of this one so that I can see a bit better, guys. We can make this image, I think, a bit brighter and more contrasty. Like it's quite on the mids to low ends. There's not much going on up here. So I'm going to go into my basic color. Let's see if we up the exposure. Oh, much better. That's actually doing so much for the color as well, which I love. So that's too much. But definitely around here. It looks, that's on and off. Already looking great. Love that. I wonder what it would do if I weight balance to a T. No. We always try things. No, I think I could do this a bit better by eye. I actually want to put a tiny bit of orange back in. Just a tiny bit, a fraction, because his skin was looking a bit blue. So it must have picked up and been reflecting the light a little bit from the background. That can happen. You can also see how this is affecting that blue color because I'm shifting that shade that I've changed too much. So if I put it back in to about here, started from the bottom, now we're here. That's looking better. I do like that. We might need to recover some of the shadows, just a slight bit. Yeah, just to bring it, they're a bit high. To bring back that contrast. The other way to do that is to pull this up and down, but I'd rather be specific with the shadows. Yeah, and we used curves here to change the color. Hue versus hue curve. Great. What if you have an example that's a little more difficult, right? Well, I have one. It's this one that's completely the wrong color. Absolutely the wrong color. Hate this example. Basically, house lights was switched on and it made everything green. So I tried to recover it this way, wasn't a fan. If we click auto, let's see what we get. It doesn't change too much. In fact, it's so minimal, I can barely see it. It's gone, actually, that's fine. We can go in and put in a bit of green because I don't think green is a bad color because your skin has a bit of green in it, especially in the shadows. And we can make this maybe a bit, no, we can't make it a bit more vibrant. It's actually already there. Go into our creative. I'm definitely bringing up the vibrance of that stuff and bringing, but because it's going to bring more saturation into the low end of those colors and not all of the color. So you can see how that's like kind of enhancing more the shadows, which is great. That definitely looks 100% better. It's so minor, isn't it? It's so minor. I can actually go more with that, I think. More, because this screen I have is very contrasty. Oh, yes, I do like that a lot. That looks way better. What about this backdrop? Maybe we can play with that again on the curves. Let's try and recover that, shall we? Where am I curve thing? There we go. Little arrow. Hue versus hue. Click here. It's identified. There's a lot of magenta in it. A shock. A horror. If we go up, it's only done a tiny bit of that. I don't like that. So let's go into, let's try this. You can see it's kind of only changing a section of it. But then we can move this out. Oh, we can move this dot out a bit, and that should expand the range a bit more. It does. Lovely. You can see me like really looking. You know what? We don't actually need to play with that. I don't think that that works. I think we've got a better way of doing this. We're not going to do hue versus hue. We're going to go into the red curve. Right? The red curve. And I'm going to put a little dot there. I like to always put a second dot here in case I change my mind and want to play with the bottom end. And I'm just seeing how the top changing this affects the top end. Now that is really affecting skin tones. So maybe I want to go even higher with this. You can see how you don't need to move a lot, because when you do, oh my goodness, it looks bad because all these dots interact with each other. So go to the top of this. There we go. Just the very top. So if I go up here, it's too pink and I can have more green in it. Doing this by eye maybe isn't the smartest thing. This calls for my RGB parade. Right, here we go. Love that for me. If I wanted to bring that red down a bit, this would be the place, I guess. And you can see it's actually bringing the reds up a little bit in those midtones as well. So before, after. That definitely brought some contrast and color back. It's not as green, which I love. It should be less pink in that background, which I think it is. And it's definitely brought more of that dynamic range back. That's a way better image. So we did it. You know what? We don't have a lot of time. So something I do want to show you before I go is how you make that LUT. So if we go back to our previous example, what if you had so much footage and you wanted to use this across everything that was blue? You know what? On my screen, this looks crazy saturated. It's wild how this looks different on live. But you're like, I would like to make a lookup table, which is a LUT, which works a bit like a filter, if we're explaining for the beginner end. And you simply go to this hamburger menu at the top. If you cannot see where my mouse is, I'm just going to underline this area. You go to the top and you say export. I prefer .cubed because I feel like it works across more apps personally. You just click export .cubed and you're like, hey, don't you love one of those desktop files that hides everything on it? Anyway, we go to blue LUT, for example, save. And that means I can go into this and I've gotten rid of all my changes. They're gone. But now, if I go to, you have two places you can put a LUT, by the way. Input LUT, which I recommend only doing as your Rec 709s, and creative, because you get a lot more adjustment room. Put it in here. Oh, I accidentally clicked on one. Oh, I guess we're just going to be holding it. Want to go to browse, blue LUT, add that on, and there it is. It's on my clip. I can put that on an adjustment layer. I could sell that. That's why loads of people were selling LUTs, because it was that quick. They were like, oh, I've already color graded my video. I guess I can make the LUT pack for this video. I'll sell that for $50. We all love a bit of passive digital income. That's how people were doing it. So yeah, micro hamburger, tell me about it. I should be wearing my glasses today. But you could use that and you can actually like make that stronger or weaker. You could be like, oh, I don't want to use that at that much intensity. I want to use that at 25. or 10 or whatever, or you can decide for whatever reason you might want to. You want to use it at 200. Again, double click to bring it back to center. And that's kind of like it. Like, that's how simple it is. You can also make these on Photoshop. If you go into Photoshop, I wonder if I could squeeze in a 2-minute. I can squeeze in 2 minutes on Photoshop. So if we go to Photoshop, you know what? I don't think we can, but if you go to Photoshop, you have to work in adjustment layers. So let's just do an example. Vibrance, great. We've got a Vibrance layer on there. Have that slider be wherever you want it to be. I don't know. Adjustments. You know what? We don't have time. However, you now have an adjustment layer. You can put all your, you can go into adjustments here and change whatever you like. And then if you wanted to export it, you could go to export and then simply go create lookup table and choose again a cube and rename it like Lula and use it in the exact same way. Oof, quick lesson there in 1 minute. Anyway, guys, that is the whole lesson. Sorry, it got a bit rushed at the end. I misread my clock. But hopefully now you've listened to an hour in color, you know how to use scopes, you can read them, and you can do some, color grading and color correction on your end. I hope you really enjoyed it. And I guess I'll catch you in the next live, whenever that is. So have a great week and happy Halloween for this week.